End of the film, I believe that she is in hell, but not like a traditional Christian hell. It's more like the Greek underworld. So basically, and massive spoilers ahead for anyone else, the timeline of events are we see that she is abusive to her autistic son. She takes him to go on the boat trip, and then they get into a car accident. Everything else in the film is just her reliving this in a quote-unquote underworld. So when it comes to Greek mythology and the underworld specifically, a lot of it was written by famous authors like Homer and philosophers like Plato. But also Dante's Inferno is a big influencer on this as well. But the general takeaway to know is that there are different layers to the underworld, or Hades, and each of these different layers you go there based on what you've done, essentially. So at the end of the film, we see that the taxi driver comes up to her after the car crash, and he tells her he's just a driver. This is a reference to Charon. So Charon is depicted right here, and he was the ferryman to the underworld. So basically, he would take you down the river Styx, and he would take you to whichever circle of the underworld you were supposed to reside in for whatever you had done, good or bad, when you died. Because the underworld, it is also surrounded by basically what would equate to heavens, like Elysium. While there are rare exceptions like Dante, Charon really only takes souls to the underworld, or to the areas surrounding them. And a lot of people wonder if Charon is somehow like a god or some kind of deity, and he's really not. He's just a ferryman, and that's why at the end of the film, the taxi driver says, "I'm just a driver." Because all he's really supposed to do is take you to get sorted in one of the layers of the underworld so that you can get placed. And we don't really see Greek mythology depicted through modern media that much. I mean, you have films like What Dreams May Come, but there's very often horror movies that reference things like this anymore, especially to the extent that it does. And one of the ways that it does this is it keeps showing these things about being in cycles and repetitive nature, which you definitely picked up on is like the idea of being in a hell loop or something like that. But if you look at the layers of the underworld, you see that there are these cycles that go on. For instance, in Dante's Inferno, one of the layers of hell, if you're there for lust, then you'll be constantly blown around by these winds and you're just thrown around for eternity because you didn't have the power to control yourself in life. And so you see that they're kind of these interesting metaphors, and it's this cycle that you go through over and over. And that's why we see the main character going through this cycle over and over, and it's not just her going through the cycle. There's potentially at least 4 versions of her running at a time, and it could be as much as dozens, because we see that time really doesn't work the same here. So I found this map that somebody had made online, which is a fairly good representation, I think, of what it would actually look like in the underworld if you're looking at the river system that connects everything. So if you were a soul and you were going to the underworld, this is what would happen. You would go through the entrance,